Last session we talked about how stereotypes will work while using Spring Boot application, and we understand lazy initialization versus eager initialization. We learned a little bit about profiles also, and profiles that we see are useful like in deployment to identify which environment we are running in so that that environment related properties it can able to pick up. Class level also we can use, bean level also we can use. Okay, so first one we covered. We will see class level also we covered, on bean level also we can do. We will do one end-to-end application for this one. Okay, so before that I'll show you how to use JDBC here, how to use JDBC in Spring Boot. Okay, so going forward, right, we are going to mix all topics together and we will do examples. In case if you want to use JDBC, from Spring JDBC we learned, from Spring JDBC module we learned connection pool is very important for us. In Spring JDBC we concluded that connection pools are important for application. It will improve performance, it can able to make users wait in the queue, it can improve the performance, right? And at a time it can able to handle multiple users request as well based on number of connections that we have. And using this connection pool we use the JDBC template and the named parameter JDBC template. Same stuff if you want to use in Spring Boot, how we can achieve that. Here one dependency has been provided, Spring Boot starter JDBC dependency. So if you can use this Spring Boot starter JDBC dependency, by default, what is the difference if you see between normal JDBC and this starter JDBC? In normal JDBC, connection pool implementation not given. Here there is no default connection pool implementation. You have to include any connection pool implementation here like Apache DBCP connection pool, basic data source, basic data source connection pool, or combo pool data source, etc. You need to include the dependencies and you should create connection pools. Then you should able to auto wire that connection pool into JDBC template and you can consume it. When it comes to Spring Boot, the starter JDBC, default connection pool given here, Hikari connection pool. Hikari connection pool by default given. So this connection pool will be created. This connection pool will be created. This is the default one. Hikari connection pool is the default connection pool by default given here. Just if you add this dependency by default, it will create this one. You need not to create any connection pool. This one by default will be available for you. Just you need to add dependency. Along with this dependency, you will be including your data source, class, URL, your username, password. You need to include these parameters because these are custom for your database. If you are using Oracle database, you need to use Oracle URL, username, passwords. If it is a MySQL configuration. If it is a DB2, DB2 configuration. As these are user specific, you need to add them. And you have to add these properties into application properties file. Just you need to keep these properties into application properties file so that by default it will create connection. And in case if you auto wire JDBC template also will be auto wired, which means by default it will create based on your dependency. It will create a JDBC template object and it will auto add. And this one you need to add it into your form file. Let's see how it will work. Okay, we will do end to end with the JDBC now. With the JDBC style, we will do create sprint starter project. Just a minute, guys. Spring Boot JDBC on.rview. Student management system. I'll include one web dependency. Lombok now itself I will include. Later if I try to include it, it will freeze my window. Okay, so just web jar file, web dependency, Lombok dependency added, and the Spring data JDBC dependency you can add here. Spring data JDBC. And I want to connect with Archil database. So search for Archil, add Archil driver here. Let's finish. Yeah, project is almost generated. Getting started. Okay. So you can check here the dependencies which we added must be here in form file. Oracle dependency, Spring Web dependency, Spring Data, JDBC dependency. Okay, three dependencies added here, and one more Lombok must be there. Lombok also we included here. Lombok project Lombok also included. Now, as I said, by default it will provide you connection pool. Just all you need to do is in your properties file add your data source properties, data source URL, username, password. Even class name also not required. So depends on the driver class which you added into your class path, into your form file. It will understand what driver you are using. Maybe by using the schema also it can understand, so that it will load the driver. I don't want to use this MySQL. Let me comment this MySQL properties. Okay, I'll use Archil here. Later I'll show you one example with MySQL also. JDBC colon Archil colon thin colon at the rate localhost 1521 exit admin the system admin. And the required connection pool size you can mention here. 50 connections I don't think my database can provide. Let me limit to 20. And the default connection pool is Hikari connection pool. This is the default connection pool. You can use this one. Now This connection pool automatically creates which objects when you add data source properties. By default, this data source properties will create Hikari connection pool. So it will be creating one data source object. Data source object it will create. When you add all these properties, right? Data source object IOC will create. IOC will create one data source object. So you can imagine that when you add these properties, data source is available with you. And if you try to auto wire JDBC template, JDBC template also available. So JDBC template object also will create, hopefully. Let's see how it will work. Will it by default creates or do I need to create using @begin? We'll see that. Let me create few packages here to handle this end-to-end. com.rview.sms dot one rest package for controller. Here you can write your controller and one package for service. I'll write service class there. One package for DAO. I'll create a database class and one more class for me for bean classes. Model package. In case if you want to create a DTO, create a DTO package also. Now let's create model first, model and DTOs. Student data I want to insert into table. So I'll be doing this use case. Imagine I have a form, ID, name, email, address I want to send and save it into database. So first I want to put this data into DTO and send it to controller, my REST controller. I'll send it to REST controller. I want to keep this data into DTO object first here. Data transfer object, which is useful to exchange information between front end and back end. Once after getting data into DTO, it will populate it into REST controller. From REST controller, I'll be forwarding it to service, service to DAO. Actually, DTO is enough as it is not JPA, but yeah, it's up to you. Model is not required. Okay, so you can send same DTO here and get the same DTO here. Anyway, we are going to write SQL query here and we will attach data which is coming from DTO and finally it will execute your query plus data on database. Whatever CRUD operation you initiated, it will complete here. Save or update or delete or select whichever it is. So this is the use case. Model is not required. Okay, model is required in the JPA. Now it is okay. DTO created. All right. Create a DTO. New student data I want to populate into it. ID, name, email, address. Create new student. Put all the properties. Private, long id, private string name, email address. Just rename it. And for getters and setters, use Spring Lombok annotation data. Okay, bus. If you want a toString method, all argument constructor, builder, all are available here. You can add them. At the rate toString method, at the rate all argument constructor, at the rate no argument constructor, whichever is required to you. Basically for you data is enough. At the rate data. Okay. Now let's create a controller class here to get the data from front end. Student rest controller. At the rate rest controller. Here you can have REST methods. We'll talk about what is REST, okay? What is REST and why it is much useful. Public student DTO, create a student. So alternative to request mapping here, right? Request mapping is having value and we'll be putting URL here. Student comma method we will be putting here get or post, something like this. As an alternate to this one, we have HTTP methods directly here, like post method, post mapping, get mapping, put mapping. Direct methods also available for you. Okay, if it is a request mapping, we are specifying the post or get or something. When we use this annotation method, annotation itself will say which method it is using. Okay, that is the only difference. So here if you see post mapping, if I use only URL I should give slash student bus. If it is a request mapping, we are adding method type and URL both. Okay. On post mapping student DTO input I will be getting. So student is having ID, name, email address. I am expecting these parameters. So 4 are not mandatory, which are optional to you. So whichever is mandatory parameters that you can send. Usually, as I said, right, IDs are not recommended to get from the user. Instead, you generate it at the back. Okay, name, email address when I submit from the front end, that will be populated here. Once after populating here, I want to send it to service class. So let's create a service class here. I need a student service. So on top of service class user, at the rate service annotation, rename this to student service. No HTTP mapping. Just create student with same input. So the data I'll get from the controller here. From here I want to make a call to DAO. use at the rate repository. Maybe save student. Now auto-wire DAO into student service and make a call to there at the rate auto-wire student to DAO, and you can make a call DAO.save. I'll be giving the same input, so it will save, and the return type of save is student to DAO. As I need same return here, I can put it in a single line. Return same call. Save it. In controller, you auto wire at the rate auto wired student service. Here also same thing. Return service dot create student. Give DTO input. Bus, you are done. And coming to DAO, here I need to do JDBC operation. For this JDBC operations, I included my data source properties here, and I am thinking that it can able to auto wire JDBC template form. Add JDBC template, and you can do your CRUD operation. JDBC template dot execute update or execute just update method. So here you can give your SQL code. Insert into student values. I'll be creating a student table and I'll insert values there. ID, name, email, address. You can give all the parameters here in the form of object array. You can get it from dto.save, get ID, dto.getName, dto.getEmail, dto.getAddress. And as I said, ID, if you don't want to get from the user, you can put some auto incrementation. Select query first and do plus plus and insert it. For now, I'll just continue with the user input. So once it saves the data, it will not return anything. Just I'll return the same DTO object. If user get back this DTO response, that means the record is saved successfully. And if you observe here, I'm not bothering about JDBC template creation with the configuration class and the data source object also. This time. So by default, considering JDBC template object will be available for me. Okay, I'll go with that consideration only. All other classes are available. In case if you have any doubt, you can put a default constructor in all the classes. Whether these objects are creating or not. Okay. So we have all the classes ready, and database logic also ready here. You may verify this table is available with ID name, email address or not. Let me check Oracle database, refresh it. Student table ID name, email address is available, and just truncate if there is any data. Truncate table. Okay. Select the star from table. There would be no data. Okay. Now let's run and try to insert it and observe whether it is creating data source object and all or not. I'll add one more statement in D2 also. I will generate no argument constructor. So web dependency we added and port number we have not configured. So by default it may go with port number 8080. Yeah, it is failing because 8080 is already being used. Server dot port is equal to 9090. Now application started, DAO in object created, controller created, service also created, and DTO not yet created. When you try to post the data, DTO object must be created. So let's try to post some data from Postman. ID name, email address. By default, it will accept the JSON input. Okay, student URL. Let me put the ID. So I'm giving one ID, name, email, address, something here. As a JSON input I am sending. This is the URL. Submit it. And I got responses saying 200 OK. With the response ID null, name null, email address null, null. Student DTO object also created. What about data? One null object inserted with zero ID. Default other values are null values. Your data not properly populating here. Okay. So here you put at the rate request body. Otherwise it cannot able to populate data here. Mention request body. Okay. And let's restart this. Submit record again. This time I got response. ID1 Dheeraj H1. The only change that I did here is request body. Without request body, this method input, whichever is you given here DTO, it is not recognized and populated your data. When you mention request body, then your JSON data populating into this B. Try to select it and see the data. There. So the data getting inserted here. And our observation is here for Spring JDBC. Is it creating JDBC template or not by default? So here you can understand that in your DAO you have auto-void JDBC template, but you did not created any data source or JDBC template. You just auto-void it. And how it is created it? As you added Spring data JDBC dependency here, by default this Spring data JDBC will be providing you data source object as well as JDBC template and named parameter JDBC template also. So in case if you want to use named parameter JDBC template here, let me create one more class DO with named parameter JDBC template. Named parameter JDBC template. Excuse me. So named parameter JDBC template, whatever here, named parameter JDBC template. So in named parameter JDBC template, so we have update method for insert, execute, query methods are for select. Yeah, there are update methods. So into that update methods, you can give as usual your query insert into student values, but here you can use named parameters. And the same named parameters you can pass here into a map object. Oh yeah, map object you can pass here. Map.port. Give that same names here and get data from your DTO. Get ID. Name, email, address. That's it. So the convenience is here. Instead of question marks, we can give proper key names, and you can pass that values via map data. You can pass them via map here, key and their values you can set, and you can pass it. So let's see if I auto wire this one and try to insert via this. Will it able to insert or not? We will see. Let me comment plain DAO and auto wire this named parameter DAO. Let's start your application and check it out. Listener refused the connection with following error. What is this? Is it JDBC connection issue? Yeah, must be JDBC issue because already connections are consuming here, right? So let's terminate it and restart it. Hopefully this time connection pool is created, application is started. You can see two DO objects is created. One is not required. The second one which we are using is named parameter template. But still we didn't upload any profiles, right? It is creating all the objects. Maybe you can imagine scenario that I want to use JDBC in local named parameter, but that's not a good example. Just anyway, you can send the data here and see. I'll be inserting one more record. Send it. Data got inserted with the named parameter JDBC template. So the data getting inserted. So from this topic, we have understanding is what we have understand that is by default JDBC template object is provided to me, named parameter also provided to me. In case if you want to test the data source also you can test. By default data source also available to you. JDBC, plain JDBC style if you want to use. Data source also you can auto-write here. For that purpose you need not to create any data source which is already provided. You can get connection. I'm not going to write any code, just I'll show you whether you will be getting connection here or not. Okay, I'll print the connection for you and you can see. Okay, so this one also will functional or not, you can understand. If connection is printing means data source also will be available to you. Otherwise how you would be getting JDBC template or name of that? We will not getting them, right? So auto wire this data source into service. data source based DAO. I just auto went. You refuse, I'll restart. Restart again. Okay. So data source object based DAO also created. Let's trigger it some data. Anyway, this data I'm not inserting. Just in console, if I get connection object bus, that means that is working. Send it. I received the same response. Go to console and see connection object is printed. Hikari connection pool with the T4 connection. Arcil T4 connection is available to you. That means data source also available. So by default, data source JDBC template, named parameter JDBC template, everything will be available to you. All that you need to do is you just need these three parameters. In case if you want to mention the pool size, you can add this one also. Okay. So out of which these three are mandatory. Just keeping these properties enough. These are mandatory, which are highlighted in red are mandatory, and this is optional. This is optional. So these are the mandatory parameters. You need to include them. Depends on your database. Depends on your database. If it is a Arcil, Arcil properties. For MySQL, MySQL properties. For DB2, DB2 properties. Depends on your database. You can add them. Yeah. So by default, when you add these three, you can imagine when these properties are available in your properties file with Spring Boot data JDBC dependency, Spring Boot starter data JDBC dependency in your form file, you can expect with these properties, right? You can expect a default via default configuration, right? A default configuration class, a default configuration class. Just I'm naming it default configuration. A configuration class which is having all the default configurations. Your data source bean at the rate bean of data source is created, at the rate bean of JDBC template is created, at the rate bean of named parameter JDBC template also created. So that's why when you auto wire them, that configuration class is already executed by default, and this at the rate beans are auto wired to you. Somewhere somebody should create them, otherwise you can't expect them. So via default configurations, these are available. In the initial discussions, we were telling that by default Spring is going to provide some default configurations that will reduce a lot of burden, right? So here if you see, these are the default beans that is created by default for you, so that you need not to stretch too much to create them. It will create it for you. You just auto wire them wherever you want. It will furnish to you. It will provide it to you. You can utilize them for your CRUD operations. Okay. So see, JDBC also they made it simple. Just you need to add your properties, but it will handle everything for you. This object creation stuff. Okay, as simple as that. So tomorrow we will see JPA, and once JPA is done, right? JPA with multiple databases I'll show you. Once that is done, we will do end to end with by including profiles, properties, many things I want to add. Okay, we will do end-to-end application if possible. UI also will include. Okay, yeah, let me unmute you. If you have any questions, you can ask. Yeah, go on, my one. Yeah, okay. Anyone having same doubt? That is what we told in MVC. So in MVC, if you remember, you understand controller service DAO. That is fine, right? You know what is controller, what is service, what is DAO as per MVC. Let's understand MVC, okay? Few steps and then. So as per MVC, we should be having clear logical separation here. Back end to front end. Front end is having front end logic, can be handled in with any technology. Maybe your simple web or any mobile based app, whatever it is. For web again, we have different choices here. Simple HTML based or any framework, Angular or React. For mobile, we have many like Android or iPhone, iOS based something. So once they submit request from front end, here somebody should catch that information. So the responsibility will taken by controller here. So controllers are responsible to fetch the data or collect the information coming from the front end. That is the job of controller here. Now once the data getting here, so in which form I need to get the data? Usually front ends will send the data in the form of JSON. This is the most universal format that we use. Or else XML or many formats they can send the data. So the universal format most recommended one is JSON. 99% we use this. So as a JSON when they send data, we should be populating here into some object. Okay. So you consider that object as a DTO, data exchange object. DTOs are data transfer objects. We call them data transfer objects. Just a medium, right? When you send something to controller, it should be able to accommodate that data into one object. It should keep it into one object. Your JSON data, it need to put it into a Java object. You can name it DTO, data transfer object. Okay. Why we need DTO? You can use model also, but I don't want to exchange my model object, which is very sensitive. When it is sensitive, you should not share with other layers. Even between your classes also, you should not share. If it is having sensitive, DAO only need to have a controller on model. If you give that D model access to service or controller, they may manipulate it, or they may play with it, or you may play with it unknowingly or accidentally. So I want to limit my model access until DAO only, which is having sensitive mappings to the database. If you imagine Hibernate mappings. So once I get the data here into DTO, I can send it to service. Service usually is having business stuff here. So for your use case, whatever business you have, you need to handle all that here. Same DTO you can transfer here. You can send it. From here, while sending it to CRUD operations or DAO, as I said, I don't want share model here. So directly you can send DTO here and you can fetch DTO data into model. You can fetch from there and you can keep it into model object. This model is database model, which is equivalent to your database table, more or less. Okay, so which is having all the mappings, table mappings and all, which is having little sensitive information, which is mapped to database. Okay, you can call it as model, or in JPA we will call it as entity. Okay, whatever it is, you can name it as a bean also. Okay, all are beans only, models, DTOs, everything. But model, why we named it is generally it is mapping to database. In database terminology also we call it as models, right? Entities or models, so that's why we named it. Okay, yeah. And there will be one more bean type, that is value objects. Like your enums are value objects, same type of data they will hold. Your wrapper class is also value objects. Integer will hold int data only. Long wrapper class will hold long data. Boolean class will hold Boolean data. We call them value objects. Okay. Value objects are simple Java classes which holds the same data. Yes, value objects are a simple example is your wrapper classes. Integer, float, you have wrapper classes, right? For simple, those are value objects. They holds the same value of it, no other data. In general, in entity, if I say student, it can hold different variables. Whereas in value object, we can hold the same data, which is meant for a purpose, like your enum. Enum can't hold, the data which is not mentioned inside the enum. Similar to that, okay? Yeah. DAO is a database. Yeah, data access objects holds the database logic. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Model is having all the annotations, right? At the rate entity, at the rate ID, at the rate table, all such information. Yeah. Not all the cases. Generally, when you imagine model classes which are having relationships between tables, right? Many to many, one to one. You need not to, keep all that models with the same information in detail. End user may not care about it. While sending the data, he may put ID of parent table ID. But in model, we put the entire entity itself in the relationship. So while they are sending, they will send a simple ID here into DTO. But while we putting it, maybe for that ID we will fetch information from the table. We bring a object, and that object we will associate with our model. When you imagine a relationship like I have a student has having multiple courses, one to many. One student model I'll be having here, and end user also will send data into student DTO. I'll be having here student model, but my student model is associated here with the courses also. So my model is internally contains again courses object. Courses may contain some other fee object. Some XYZ objects might be associated in a chain here. But in DTO, I don't put all that information. Instead of course object association, I'll give simple course ID. Okay. Yeah. End user may not care about your relationships. If you send the same information, what will happen if you have a model here, let's say A is having association of B is having C is having D. Multi-level associations when you have, by default, when we apply cascade, all right, I believe it will fetch all the information from your tables. When you fetch A, it will get the B will get the C will get the D will get the E, F, G, H, all the tables information you will get. When you send that as it is to front end will get large object, which is not at all useful. Getting right? Yeah. Multiple associations. In front end, I want just I send student information. I just want student information back. That is my requirement. But in model, if you imagine Hibernate, when you get parent object will get the associated child objects also. If you select a student, like Praveen. If you get Praveen data, what it will do, Praveen associated other objects information also it will fetch without your call. Let Yeah, if customer is having order, something like that. Okay, other associated beans also it will fetch by default. Okay, so hmm, hmm. I'm not sure where is it, but there will be one default configuration class. If you want to know more about it, print all the objects which are available by default. Maybe use actuator for it. Okay, so that you'll be getting all. We will try it tomorrow session. Okay, yeah. Semicolon. Where is it? Named parameter JDBC template. Placeholder. Placeholders. We call them placeholder. It's a way of format, string format. Simply by using this colon. Generally, SQL will do this. In SQL, if you try to execute the same, right, it will take it as a named parameters. I believe we tried this before as well. SQL engine format itself like this. Yeah, see, it's part of SQL. ADC. These all are primitives. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, of course. So here, actually, you need to give valid parameters. If you don't provide them, you know, with a valid data type, definitely you'll be getting exception. Object is a parent for everything. It will accept everything. Primitive, yeah, maybe internally it will do wrapping. This name, email, address are simple strings, right? Strings are classes again. Classes, all classes are childs for objects only. Mhm. Again, this one also a placeholder. First placeholder, second, third, fourth. We need to insert along with values when you use this one. Insert into student, you should give values here itself. Yes. What is invalid character? Insert into student values. It should be correct on right. No, no, no. We can use. We can use this format also. Not sure. Yeah, check it about it. Okay, it should be working. Insert into student ID name email address. Maybe keys I should give here. Yeah, column names. Then it accepts. Maybe. Yeah. No, I should see it. If that is not working, I can't do anything. Okay, I will check it. Okay, I am not getting time. I will see if that works. We will try. And yeah, but I shared your document, right? You have to. You have to install and check it. Why you are not able to install? I have all the database. Yeah, you should have. You should not depend on that cloud stuff. I have Mongo, just 16 GB machine. My one. I have Workbench, MongoDB. Usually I used to have DB2 also earlier. IBM DB2. Archil I have. DB2. SQL Server also I used to have before. You can down some services. Maybe go to taskbar or somewhere on startup services might be starting right. You can shut down them. Whenever you require, you can start them. Okay.